Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode right now of our podcast. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Justine Lemos on the podcast today, talking all about Vedic astrology, which you know is a topic that just loves so much here in our space. So thank you, Justine. We're so excited to have you here.
I'm really excited to be with you. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, of course. So the first thing that we always like to ask on our show is, when was the first time that you felt something on a soul level?
I grew up in a slightly unusual counterculture family. And so I was involved in many ceremonies and rituals and a variety of capacities from a really young age. And so that soul level feeling was kind of always present and always there. But I became involved very deeply in Vedic wisdom and the cultures of India in 1995, when I saw a performance of a style of classical Indian dance that was just so, it just stirred my soul on a very, very deep level, that I then went ahead and studied that form of dance with my teacher, my guru, very, very intensely for more than 20 years. And it really just brought me into a pathway of learning about the variety of Vedic and tantric arts.
Wow. So you didn't grow up with the Vedic rituals, but I would love to hear what some of those ceremonies were.
Well, I grew up in the counterculture of Northern California. So I grew up with a variety of rituals and ceremonies derived from a variety of roots. And certainly nature-based worship, we could say, was infused in my childhood.
Lovely. So already connecting with the elements and nature, which is very much a part of Vedic wisdom.
Exactly.
And how long have you, or I should say, in the beginning when you were starting to come into this form of dance, what was some of that initial connection? Because I actually grew up dancing too. It's such a passion of mine and still is. And I think it's such a specific relationship that you can have with the divine. And I'd love to hear what that connection was like for you.
Well, actually, at that time, when I first saw this performance of this style of dance, then I went on to train very, very intensely in, not just like as a put on the costume and look cute or like learn one piece, like actually really very intensely study the form as a sadhana, as a spiritual discipline. I was specifically looking for a connection between devotion, between mystical or religious experience and movement, which was not available to me insofar as I could tell in Western forms of dance that I had been exposed to and had studied in my childhood. Like that pathway was just closed for a variety of historical and reasons. And I saw this form and then I began to practice it. And so much of what I was looking for in terms of a relationship to devotion to the divine, both in the content in terms of the mythology, as well as in the embodiment process, was present. And so that's what drew me into this form. And then I spent many, many years studying that form, as well as another form of classical Indian dance that I studied in India for many years, and had a Fulbright, was studying in India, which is how I became involved in Ayurveda, and then eventually how I became involved also in the wisdom that is jyotish or Vedic astrology.
Wow, beautiful. I would love to hear, what is your current relationship with dance? Because, yeah, I don't want to insert anything. I just would love to hear that.
Yeah, so I still am involved in and practice classical Indian dance. I, for many years, was performed very frequently and very intensely. I perform a lot less now for a variety of reasons. And am also I'm very, my academic research has to do with dance and embodiment. That's
Mm.
published mostly for universities. And then I'm involved in dance and movement and a few different pathways that I practice at this time.
So lovely. Yeah, it's so interesting. I relate to your story as I grew up competitive dancing. It was very intense, training hours upon hours, and often I would put it above my academics in a lot of ways. It was just my life and so absorbed into it and so much structure, a lot of masculinity into it. And for me right now, dance is really becoming more of that femininity of connecting back to my creative power and movement and connection. And it's so crazy and amazing how this creative ritual that we can have, we can just like really start to shift our relationship with it and it can change within us in so many different ways. So I'd love to hear more about when you started to first find, and this happens when we find the Vedas, it's like you find one thing and you open one door and you're like, oh my gosh, I want everything. That's how I feel, like a kid in a candy store. What specifically drew you to the science of light, so the science of jyotish?
So the understanding of jyotish was, I'm trained as an Ayurveda, a clinical Ayurvedic practitioner. And in my training, the jyotish chart, the natal chart of every client that we studied and every case that we studied is always included in the pathway that I study. And this is not the same for all schools of Ayurveda and thought. They are two separate branches, but the school that I studied with always incorporated this understanding of jyotish. And so we were learning jyotish basics at the same time that we were learning Ayurveda. But at that time, it was like too much for my brain. And I kind of like, I dove into it a bit, to the point where I was looking at certain markers in the chart for certain disease propensities or for certain things and karmas that might arrive in the lifetime. But I had to kind of compartmentalize it and put it to the side, because I was like, well, if I go into this now, I'm not going to be able to understand Ayurveda. And then after completing my training, one never completes, but that practitioner training in Ayurveda, then I began to dive more and more into jyotish. And though I've been studying jyotish for, I don't know, maybe 10 years, I really think of myself as very much a beginning student in many ways. And I began to really see how the understandings of jyotish really allows us a window into the particular karma of a particular lifetime. You know, why is one person born with a certain body? Why is one person born with an arm that doesn't work? There's no like, and nobody's done anything to cause that. I mean, with some things in Ayurveda, we can say, well, you ate McDonald's every single day for 35 years, you have a heart problem, like cause and effect. It's very logical, you know what I mean? And we're making mistakes all the time and we're rectifying those mistakes. But then there are these larger blueprints, these larger frameworks that we can't understand. You know, someone who has been healthy throughout the lifetime, has had a good diet, has good emotional processing, has lived in a natural place, and then they have cancer. The thinking mind can't understand why this should occur in this lifetime, right?
Right.
But jyotish, when we begin to look at the larger patterns of the cosmos for this particular soul, then we can begin to understand those patterns, and we can begin to take remedies at these larger cosmic levels, right? Because the dietary remedy won't work for all situations, or the herbal remedy. We need sometimes we need larger things to create shift in the lifetime.
Totally. Yeah, I love the bigger perspective that jyotish brings because, you know, Ayurveda is so beautiful because it's really this connection of coming back to yourself and the body, which is, it's everything. That's how we begin to experience this world. That's where knowledge is truly birthed from, is understanding the body. But then when you start to go into Vedic astrology, and it just like expands your mind so much, like you were saying, and you can just see it on a level of the cosmos. It's a connection that's even deeper before than you could ever even imagined. And it just keeps on developing, and it's just like this infinite wave of exploring more about yourself. And one of the aspects that I've really just starting, and again, I'm very beginner into jyotish and learning and studying, and something that I've been getting more into is understanding the nakshatras, which is very different than Western astrology, which I know some of our community may be privy to Western astrology, even though we talk a lot about Vedic astrology on this podcast. But I would love to hear from you, what are the nakshatras, and how is this different than how Western astrology uses this system?
So in sidereal astrology, which is Western astrology, has its basis in Vedic astrology, but Western astrology is accurate to what was happening about 2,000 years ago. It didn't account for the progressions of the equinoxes. And so when someone encounters Vedic astrology, everything is turned upside down in a sense. And all those markers of identification that you thought were very, very real for you, like I am a Pisces and it means all this stuff about me, is not necessarily true to what was actually in the sky at the moment of your birth. What was actually in the sky at the moment of the birth. So for example, in Western astrology, my sun sign is in Cancer, and Vedic astrology, my sun sign is in Gemini. And frequently things will travel backwards because of the progression of the equinoxes. And in Vedic astrology, while the sun is very important, the rising sign and the moon are of equal, if not more, importance than the sun. And Vedic astrology, and some research would point to this system being older than the zodiac system of 12 signs that you will be probably familiar with, is based upon a system of 27 star signs and places, spaces. And these are actual stars that are in the sky, actual stars that are in the sky. And each nakshatra, each star sign, is 13 and 20 degrees. And so there are about 3 nakshatras in and between each sign, each of the zodiacal signs, that are a refinement on and a deeper understanding of where you are in that particular sign. A sign is a very large derivation, a very large portion of the sky. The nakshatra is a further refinement, and actually there are further refinements within that and within that and within that. The lunar nakshatra, where your moon is in this system of 27 star signs, is of great importance to who your soul is, and kind of that hero or heroine's journey through this lifetime. So knowing who your lunar nakshatra is, knowing which of those star signs your moon is in, actually, if you go to a temple in India, they announce you to the gods by your name and your star sign. Because there might be like 100,000 other Justines in the world, but this is Justine with this star sign. This is who you are. This is who your soul is. And you actually have to know your nakshatra. You have to know your star sign really to go do a puja at a temple. And so the star signs are very, very important in terms of understanding someone's chart. And each day, it's a little bit more or less than a day, the moon visits a different one of these star signs, the 27 nakshatras that are the 27, that nakshatras are the 27 wives of the moon. 27 different wives of the moon that represent in many ways the qualities of the mind. There are these 27 different qualities of mind that the moon, who is our mind, then travels through and visits the Shaktis, the essential powers of the signs themselves. So these are the Nakshatras. I actually teach a course on the Nakshatras. Yeah. What else do you want to know about the Nakshatras? I can talk about them for a long time.
Yeah, I love that. I love to hear how you personally connect with them because, like as you said, they change every day. So is that one of a personal practice of just becoming aware of the nakshatras, or how does that look in your life?
So it won't be exactly every day, and we should distinguish between the nakshatras, which is where the moon is in the sky, to the lunar phase, which is actually called the titi, the lunar phase. So all of these things intersect. So you can be born on the 8th lunar day in the nakshatra of Magha, which is very different than being born on the full moon day in the nakshatra of Magha. And each of these things has a particular resonance. It's like intertwining, interlocking circles and clockwork all coming together in a particular way that then gives a particular resonance to each individual day and each individual moment. It's very beautiful. And so we can pay attention, we can attend to the nakshatra of each individual day, and it does give a particular flavor to that day. I, in particular, pay attention to the new moon, where the nakshatra of the new moon is, where the nakshatra of the full moon is. And those are important markers to see what energies will unfold for the next 30 days, especially the new moon will really set a lot of the energies up for the next 30 days of what is coming. And I do full and new moon circles on those days that impart energies of the nakshatras.
I love that. It's so true. It's because it's the same as the moon. If the moon moves on average around 2.5 days per zodiac sign, and it's so much more helpful when we have the new moon and the full moon to really cast our intentions and just to feel the strength and the power that's happening during that time. And I love that Vedic astrology has that extra hint of detail, of specificity that you can go into with the nakshatras, because it just really opens up a whole other world and a whole other deeper layer of really being able to understand this connection.
Yeah.
How can we use the nakshatras to heal? So in knowing that extra little layer about them, how is this actually helping us to heal?
So the lunar nakshatra will have a great deal to do with the mind. Whereas the solar nakshatra really has to do with like our mythic journey through the lifetime. And the ascendant nakshatra is really kind of like a superpower. And because the nakshatras are the shaktis, they are the vital power, the vital energy. Knowing our own nakshatras really allows us to access our strength in the lifetime and can allow access to our dharmic path. What is it that you are here to experience and do? Now, so that's like in a large sense in terms of our holistic health and happiness. And then there are certain nakshatras where it will be better to begin a medicine or begin an herbal medicine or to undertake a surgery, etc. So those are kind of these larger ways. Now, if we're talking about like disease propensity and health throughout the lifetime, this is more complex and has to do with the transits of what is crossing over your chart at a particular time. If there's a chaotic energy moving across your 6th house, the house of the physical body, maybe it's being transited by Rahu. That could be a time where it could be, depending upon other markers in the chart, it could be a difficult time for the health. So we can just see these brushstrokes as they unfold.
Do you have any examples of how you've connected to specific nakshatras and how that's been deep part of your healing journey?
Well, I've done a lot of different things with the nakshatras. One way that we can connect with them is we can spend 3 cycles through 27 nakshatras, each day being in resonance with that energy and learning about that particular energy. Because each nakshatra, they're very complex. They have a ruling deity, they have an element, they have a certain power, a certain shakti, they have a certain tree or medicine that's associated with them. They've got a mythology that's associated with them. And then as we take the nakshatras into sequence, they work together in terms of what comes before and what comes after them. They're always in relationship with each other. They also work in patterns of 3 and across the chart from each other. So living with the nakshatra and the journey of the nakshatra, is in itself very, very healing, especially to the mind. When we're dealing with the nakshatras, we are really predominantly in the realm of the mind and in the realm of the prana. The nakshatras also have a correspondence to the chakra system, where the 108 petals of the 7 chakra system correspond to different nakshatras and to the different sounds, the bija mantras of the nakshatras that activate the petals in the 108 petals of the 7 chakra system. So when we begin to refine, and if we work through the nakshatras for 27 days and chant the mantras, the bija mantras of the nakshatras, we'll move through all the petals and all the chakras like that in the subtle body.
So beautiful. Do you have any specific nakshatras that you have maybe an affinity towards or that you want to highlight for some of our community members to just get a deeper understanding? Because obviously we don't have time to go into all 27 of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hate to say like favorite ones. It's like I don't want to make some seem not as good as the others, and actually that's the story of the moon, where I don't know if you know this story. So Chandra the Moon had 27 wives. He's considered a great playboy. And actually it's interesting because in Vedic mythology, the moon in one way is male. So Chandra had 27 wives, and those 27 wives are the nakshatras, but he just had one special wife who he really liked a lot. And her name is Rohini. And she's the 4th of the nakshatras, the red one. And she's a very, very sexy nakshatra. Like she's like the red goddess who is aroused and fertile, and flowers blossom where she walks. She's like a cart, a springtime cart. She's very much the energy of the springtime, like fertile maiden. And so he was spending all of his time with Rohini, and all of the other wives, they got upset because their husband wasn't ever visiting them. And so they went to their father, Dakshina, and they said, Daddy, our husband isn't paying attention to us. And so Dakshina cursed Chandra. He cursed the moon, that the moon should wither and die. Actually, he specifically cursed him with tuberculosis. It's very interesting. And so the moon began to wither. And all of the gods said, oh my God, this is not good. If the moon dies, then all life will be extinguished. We can't live without the sun and moon. The sun and moon have to be at their specific places in order for there to be life on Earth. If they aren't there, all life is obliterated, right? We know this. It's absolutely scientifically true. And so the gods went to Shiva and said, Shiva, you've got to do something about this, right? And so Shiva went to Chandra and said to Chandra, hey, listen, buddy, you've got to go visit your wives. And in doing so, Shiva, he couldn't remove the curse, because once a curse is given, you can't remove it, but he changed it. He changed it so that the moon would wax and wane and always be changing, and that he would spend time with each of his wives. But the interesting thing is that the moon tends to linger in some of the nakshatras longer than others. The time that's spent in the nakshatras is not perfectly equal. And that is because the moon is visiting these different shaktis and spends more time in others than with some others. And see, this is the mind. The moon is the mind. And this is this beautiful reminder from Shiva, the god of yoga, that we should have equanimity. That we happen, like there are some states of mind that we think that we really like a lot, or some qualities that we think we really like a lot. And these are our kleshas, our mental, emotional, thoroughfares that we tend to go down over and over and over again, our same pathways of thinking. And this is where the moon is just visiting one wife, but we need to learn to visit all the frames and states of mind with this sense of equanimity. And so this is why Shiva has a crescent moon in his top knot. It is this reminder of the waxing and waning of the mind, the changeability of the mind that's there in this myth. So this is, I will not be like Chandra and spend all my time with one wife. So I can't really say a favorite nakshatra.
I love that story. I love all mythology and all the different underlying metaphors and motifs that are beautifully intertwined with it. That's so perfect. And I'm feeling also timely because my rising sign is in Rohini. And I think I have Mars in Rohini as well. So I love hearing that.
Oh, yeah. Rohini is a very sexy nakshatra.
So certain planets can also be in nakshatras. Given
all
our
the
current...
planets have to be in nakshatras. They cannot not be in nakshatras. Yeah, they must be.
So given our current planetary alignment, are there any specific nakshatras that our planets are in that you have been noticing and observing, that you've been feeling or experiencing, or maybe your clients have been feeling and experiencing?
Yeah, so a few things here. Like, of course, we'll be in a time delay when this comes out. So, right now we've been experiencing what is called a planetary war, a yud, between Mars and Venus. That has been quite intense and very frictive. Mars and Venus are energies that are really the meeting of fire and water, the most enveloping energy along being Venus, with the most penetrating energy, that which is Mars. And so that particular confluence of energy has been incredibly frictive and will continue to be for some time. Additionally, Rahu and Ketu, which are the shadow planets, the two nodes of the moon, are going to change signs, which they only do once every 18 months. And at that time, and actually right now, already Rahu, which is the node of the moon, is already in Kritika Nakshatra. Kritika Nakshatra spans between Aries and Taurus. And right now, Rahu is in Taurus, in Kritika, and then it moves backwards into Kritika Nakshatra in Aries in April, mid-April. And Rahu will stay in Aries with Ketu in Libra for 18 months. The nodes stay in particular signs for 18 months. And Kritika, where Rahu is, and going to go into Aries, still in Kritika, is the razor blade. It's a very sharp razor-like instrument. Its deity is Agni, the fire god. And fire, Agni, has two faces, one that is very creative and one that is very destructive. And Agni and Kritika is very, very sharp. It brings into focus a great deal of analysis and penetration. And so Rahu being there, Rahu always makes things confused. And so it's like a lot of analysis without real substance. It's like analyzing, it's like the paralysis of analysis, the person who gets stuck in talk therapy for 15 years but never heals because they just talk about healing over and over and over again, and then they never actually heal. So something that's very, very good through this time, and while Rahu is in Kritika, which is going to stay in Kritika Nakshatra for several months, I'm looking at the chart right now, all the way through into the summer, is Vedic fire ceremony. Vedic fire ceremony and ritual is very, very good at this time. Yeah, Rahu's in Kritika Nakshatra all the way through July. In August, Rahu goes into Bharani Nakshatra, so goes into the next nakshatra over. Let's see, when will it go to Bharani? Right after, like, July 8th, 9th, July 12th, it'll move to the next nakshatra.
Yeah, there's so many planetary shifts that are happening in April that I've been gearing my community up for. The Rahu and Ketu one is really prevalent, and also the Jupiter and Saturn one. I have been in my Saturn's in Capricorn, and so I've been feeling this current cycle that we're in, and I'm looking forward to just a little bit of a breather as Saturn goes into Aquarius and Jupiter into Pisces. Have you looked at any of these nakshatras for these two planets?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everybody has been all clogged up. Everybody, meaning all of the planets, have been all clogged up in just a little bit of space. They've all been down in the signs ruled by Saturn in Aquarius and Capricorn, which are the collective Muladhara chakra. The signs, of course, correspond to the chakras, and this creates a lot of collective fear and anxiety. Venus and Mars have been, like, I'm looking at the chart from March 14th right now, have been in Shravana Nakshatra, but they're tightly conjoined in a war, in a yud. And this is the star of listening, Shravana is. And so it's almost like, because they're so tightly conjoined, no one can listen, no one can really hear. Saturn is in Capricorn in Dhanishta. This is a lot of hard work in Dhanishta, the wealthy star. And actually, yes, like you said, Saturn's going to cross over and go into Aquarius, but then it's going to retrograde back into Capricorn. It's going to grind basically back and forth across the collective muldar, bringing out all of this fear and anxiety. We'll see, like we've seen, lessening of pandemic restrictions, etc., as Jupiter has progressed through Aquarius into going into Pisces, but then Saturn's going to retrograde back. And I've said this all along, like, don't get too excited, friends. That's just my opinion. So, all of the planets are tightly congested down in the Muladhara chakra, creating this powerful confluence of energies. The sun moves frequently, so it's been in Purva Bhadra Pada. Jupiter's been in Purva Bhadra Pada, which is the front part of a funeral cot. So while Jupiter is moving through Aquarius, it's really a lot of death and a lot of mourning and a lot of sorrow. So that's all there.
That definitely feels so alive, because I feel with all that change that's about to happen too, it's, in order for change to happen, it's a death. It's whether that's an ego identity, whether that is something in a physical form. There's something needs to let go in order for this new things to shift and everything, which, always isn't the type of work that we find to be most glamorous, but it's what the work that needs to be done, that needs to be addressed, that's coming up now. So it's always for its best intention. Even though for Saturn, I've been like making jokes about it this whole time. I am so grateful for all the lessons that it's brought, because truly I don't know where I wouldn't be where I'm at right now without those lessons that have really made these shifts, even though they felt dramatic at times and so intense and didn't want them to happen. I now looking back, you see how everything you're so grateful for that it happened.
Mm. And you know, all of the signs, or I'm sorry, all of the planets, which are the chakras, which are the subtle body, all being clustered together in just two signs. This is called a yuga yoga, when they're all just
Mm.
in two signs. The moon was also down there for a minute too. Now the yuga yoga is broken because the moon has been traveling about. But this is unusual. This does not happen frequently, and in many ways it's like a grand reset, like starting over at the very beginning, with everyone stacked down in our roots together, and then they get to travel to different places in the cosmic subtle body.
Mm. Thank you for sharing all of that. I feel so relatable on so many levels and layers. And it'll be really fruitful for our community to understand. Just that's what I love about astrology too. It just gives us that extra depth and layer of understanding what's happening in the collective, because sometimes you feel it, but you can't really name it. And
That's
it
right.
really it helps you to give that clarity, and then having that compassion for it's okay to feel grief right now. It's okay to feel and go through that death right now. It's actually in alignment if you do process and feel that.
Mhm.
I am so grateful for your time and all of your wisdom on here. I absolutely love learning more about Vedic astrology and all the mythology. It is so beautiful to hear. I would love to hear what you are currently working on and your offerings. I know we're recording this in March, and this may not come out for a few months, but how can our community reach you and find you?
So you can reach me at my website, justinelemos.com. Usually my offerings are there. I teach a variety of courses on Ayurveda, on Vedic astrology, as well as programs on Shakti, on various faces and energies of um, the goddess in a deeply embodied kind of way, not just like I'm going to throw on some flowers and pretend that I'm a goddess or something like that. No issue with people who do that. This is just a little bit different. Um, but and then I do work with one-on-one clients in Ayurveda and Vedic astrology, and usually in a mixture of the two. And in Ayurvedic spiritual counseling, which is really the, you know, Vedic equivalent of psychology, is one of my passions and something that I really like to work with.
I love all of that. We'll have that linked below in the show notes so our community can get to know some of your expertise. And again, I just want to thank you so much for your time. And I know this is going to be so fruitful for our community to hear more about it. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Beautiful. We will see you next time, everyone, for the next episode. I hope you all have a wonderful day.